The demand didn't come in anger. That was what made it dangerous. It arrived calmly, professionally. Wrapped in praise, framed as logic, delivered as inevitability. The kind of request that assumes agreement before the other person has even spoken. Anthony Hopkins sat across from his agent in a quiet office overlooking the city. The walls were lined with framed posters. Films they worked on together. Awards nights captured in glossy stills, moments frozen and curated. The agent leaned back in his chair, fingers loosely interlaced. "I think it's time we revisit our arrangement," he said. Hopkins didn't react. He waited. "You've reached a level," the agent continued, "where it's fair to acknowledge the role representation has played in shaping your success." Hopkins nodded once, not in agreement, just acknowledgement. "I'm proposing a revised structure," the agent said. "Double commission going forward." The words landed softly. Too softly. Hopkins looked at him. "Double," he repeated. "Yes," the agent said smoothly. "It reflects the reality, the positioning, the strategy, the doors that were opened." Hopkins remained still. The agent mistook that for contemplation. "You didn't become who you are in a vacuum," he added. "Careers like yours don't happen without guidance." That was the moment something shifted. Not outwardly. Internally. Hopkins glanced at the posters on the wall. Roles chosen carefully. Years of restraint. Projects turned down quietly when they didn't align. Long stretches where no one was calling, and he was content with that. He looked back at the agent. "You're asking for double pay," Hopkins said calmly. "I'm asking for recognition," the agent corrected. Hopkins smiled faintly. "There's a difference," he said. The agent waved a hand dismissively. "This isn't personal. It's business." Hopkins nodded. "That's usually when it becomes personal." The agent chuckled, trying to keep things light. "Tony, don't misunderstand me. I've always been in your corner." "I know," Hopkins replied. "That's why I'm listening carefully." The agent leaned forward now. "Let's be honest," he said. "Your work is exceptional. No one disputes that. But consistency at this level requires orchestration, timing, leverage." Hopkins waited. "And that leverage," the agent continued, "comes from me." Silence followed. Hopkins didn't interrupt it. He let the agent fill it. "You don't like talking about yourself," the agent went on. "You don't chase headlines. That's admirable. But it also means someone has to do that work for you." Hopkins nodded again. "I've done that work," the agent said. "For decades." The room felt smaller now. Hopkins folded his hands. "Tell me something," he said. The agent smiled, sensing an opening. "Of course. Which doors did you open that I couldn't have walked through on my own?" Hopkins asked. The agent hesitated just a fraction too long. "Well," he said, recovering, "opportunities aren't just about access. They're about framing. About making studios see you the right way." Hopkins tilted his head. "And what way is that?" The agent smiled. "As indispensable." Hopkins considered that. "I've never tried to be indispensable," he said. "I've tried to be honest." The agent laughed lightly. "Honesty doesn't sell. It endures," Hopkins replied. The agent's smile thinned. "Tony," he said, dropping the pretense, "this is how the industry works. People get their share when they contribute to the outcome." Hopkins met his gaze. "Then let's talk about contribution," he said. The agent nodded. "Exactly." Hopkins leaned back. "Do you remember the years when no one was calling?" Hopkins asked. The agent frowned. "Which years?" "Exactly," Hopkins said. The agent shifted uncomfortably. "I remember choosing roles when there was no leverage," Hopkins continued. "Turning down work that would have paid well but hollowed me out. I remember silence." "That was strategy," the agent said quickly. "No," Hopkins replied. "That was solitude." The agent exhaled. "You're romanticizing it." Hopkins smiled faintly. "You're monetizing it." The air cooled. "Let me be clear," the agent said, voice firm now. "I'm not asking. I'm stating what I believe is fair." Hopkins nodded. "And I'm listening." The agent took that as progress. "Good," he said. "Because this is the moment when people at your level reassess who helped build the brand. Brand, Hopkins looked away briefly. He thought of rehearsal rooms, of long nights with scripts, of the private discipline no one saw, of choosing restraint when flamboyance would have been rewarded. He looked back. I don't have a brand, Hopkins said. I have a body of work. The agent scoffed. That's semantics. No, Hopkins said. That's ownership. The agent leaned back, crossing his arms. Without representation, that body of work wouldn't have reached the heights it did. Hopkins studied him for a long moment. Do you believe that? He asked. The agent hesitated again. Enough to stake double pay on it, he said. Hopkins nodded slowly. Then let me ask you something else, he said. The agent gestured. Go on. If I were to leave today, Hopkins said, what happens to your leverage? The agent laughed. Tony, come on. We're not talking hypotheticals. Hopkins didn't smile. I am. The agent's laughter faded. You're not serious, he said. Hopkins held his gaze. I always am. The agent straightened. You wouldn't walk away over this. Hopkins said nothing. The agent pressed on. You need representation. Hopkins replied calmly. I need alignment. That's idealism. No, Hopkins said. That's clarity. The agent stood now, pacing slightly. You're reacting emotionally, he said. Hopkins shook his head. I'm reacting precisely. The agent stopped pacing. Then say no. Hopkins remained silent. Say it, the agent urged. So we know where we stand. Hopkins looked at him. Before I do, he said, I want to understand something. The agent sighed. What now? When did my success become your achievement? Hopkins asked. The question hung in the air. The agent's expression hardened. That's unfair. Hopkins nodded. So is claiming ownership over someone else's discipline. The agent bristled. I built this with you. Hopkins corrected him gently. You supported it. The distinction landed hard. The agent returned to his chair slowly. You're making a mistake, he said. Hopkins smiled faintly. Possibly. You'll regret this. Hopkins shook his head. I regret very little. I refuse often. The agent leaned forward again, eyes narrowing. Then give me your answer, he said. Hopkins met his gaze. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't justify himself. He didn't negotiate. He simply prepared to end the conversation. But he didn't speak yet. Because the 4 words that would follow, spoken calmly, without anger, without explanation, would not only end the negotiation, they would end the relationship. And what happened after that, how the industry reacted, how the agent responded, and why those 4 words became legend was still to come. That part of the story had not yet been told. The silence stretched longer than the agent expected. He was used to pushback, used to bargaining, to raised voices, to grudging compromise. He was not used to stillness. Hopkins didn't shift in his chair, didn't glance at the clock, didn't fidget. He looked at the agent the way one looks at a door that has already been decided on, open or closed, no longer debated. Finally, the agent spoke again, slower now. You're really going to throw this away? He asked. Over money? Hopkins answered calmly. This isn't about money. Then what is it about? Hopkins considered him for a moment longer, as if deciding whether the answer would be heard or merely reacted to. It's about ownership, he said. Of effort. Of discipline. Of responsibility. The agent shook his head. You don't get to the top alone. No, Hopkins agreed. But you don't stay there by mistaking support for authorship. The agent exhaled sharply. You're being ungrateful. Hopkins smiled faintly. No. I'm being exact. The agent stood again, anger finally breaking through the polish. You think studios call you because you're some monk in a rehearsal room? He snapped. They call because I position you. Because I manage perception. Because I protect your image. Hopkins didn't interrupt. The agent continued, voice rising. You think they care about your solitude? Your silence? They care about momentum. Hopkins nodded once. Then they care about the wrong things. The agent stopped pacing. You're making this philosophical because you don't want to face reality, he said. This is business. Hopkins leaned forward slightly for the first time. Then let's speak plainly, he said. The agent straightened. Finally, Hopkins looked him directly in the eye. I didn't hire you to own my success, he said. I hired you to manage logistics. The agent's jaw tightened. And somewhere along the way, Hopkins continued. You confused proximity with authorship. That's insulting. It's accurate, Hopkins replied. The agent laughed bitterly. You won't find someone who'll do what I've done for you. Hopkins nodded. That may be true. Then why would you risk it? Hopkins answered without hesitation. Because I'd rather be unsupported than misrepresented. The room went quiet again. The agent stared at him, searching for the crack. The doubt. The opening where pressure could still work. He didn't find it. So what? The agent said slowly. You're just going to walk? Hopkins paused. Then he spoke the 4 words. I don't agree. Goodbye. That was it. No preface. No explanation. No raised voice. Just a statement of fact. The agent froze. You can't be serious, he said. Hopkins stood. I am, he replied. You'll regret this, the agent said again, but now it sounded thinner. Less certain. Hopkins picked up his coat. I regret confusion, he said. Not clarity. He walked to the door. The agent followed him halfway across the room. You're burning bridges, he said. Hopkins stopped, turned once more. No, he said gently. I'm leaving one. Then he opened the door and left. The relationship ended not with lawyers or headlines, but with absence. Within days, the industry noticed. Calls didn't stop coming. They changed. Some agents reached out immediately, sensing opportunity. Hopkins declined them all. He didn't rush to replace anything. Studios, however, were curious. Is it true you parted ways? One executive asked quietly during a meeting weeks later. Yes, Hopkins replied. Why? Hopkins smiled faintly. Misalignment. That was all he said. The agent tried to spin the story, privately at first, then more openly. He wouldn't be where he is without me, he told colleagues. I made him. The problem was timing. Because Hopkins continued working, selectively, calmly, without disruption. Projects moved forward. Performances landed. Nothing faltered. The narrative collapsed under its own weight. Soon, the agent found himself on the other side of rooms he once controlled. No longer invited into certain conversations. No longer assumed to be indispensable. Hollywood has a way of recalibrating power silently. And the story of the 4 words traveled faster than the truth. People whispered it. He just said goodbye. No argument. No negotiation. Didn't even raise his voice. The legend wasn't that Hopkins fired his agent. It was how. No theatrics. No leverage play. No revenge. Just refusal. Years later, a younger actor asked Hopkins about it during a quiet dinner. Is it true you walked away from your agent over money? The actor asked. Hopkins considered the phrasing. I walked away from confusion, he corrected. But weren't you afraid? The actor pressed. Of losing momentum? Hopkins smiled. Momentum belongs to people who chase it. What belongs to you then? Hopkins answered after a pause. Direction. The actor nodded slowly. That 4-word reply, the actor said. People still talk about it. Hopkins shrugged lightly. It wasn't meant to be remembered. But it was. Yes, Hopkins said. Because it was complete. That was the key. There was nothing to argue with. Nothing to reinterpret. Nothing to negotiate. The sentence closed the door without slamming it. And in an industry built on noise, that kind of finality is rare. The agent eventually found new clients. Life went on. But he never again demanded double pay. Because once you hear what a boundary sounds like, spoken clearly, calmly, without anger, you don't forget it. Anthony Hopkins didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't justify. He simply declined ownership being claimed where it didn't belong. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that the strongest response isn't the loudest one. It's the one that leaves no room for misunderstanding. For words. That was all it took. And that's why they became legendary.